What's up, Indian family? I got a good one for you today. So today I'm at Branch O'Keefe and O'Keefe, ready to pick up my heads for a Power Plus 100. So stick with me and let's go inside. We're in Long Beach or Signal Hill, California, and this is the famous Branch O'Keefe. Ooh, look at that. This is where they do high performance heads for Harleys, Indians, and guess what? Now for Harleys and S&S Indians. And now the Power Plus. These are my heads that are going to one of my builds. They use the existing valves, put new seals in, abrasive blast at the inside. There was more options like going with brass valve guides, but I decided just to stick with the stock since this is not for my personal bike. This is for a flipper. Look at that. And they do a lot more high performance stuff here with port and polish, boring out and honing up cylinders. So, hey John, you back there? Oh, here's John. There you go. This is a famous John from Brancho and O'Keefe. How long you been doing this now?
46 years here.
46 years. And I have the pleasure of having them local, so I don't have to ship anything. Just drop them off and pick them up when they're done. So can you kind of just explain a little bit what we did to these heads?
Yeah, we wanted to bring them back to stock running condition. So we didn't, go into the much larger valves, and the valves that are in it, we rehabbed them so they would work good again. They needed to be refaced, and the tips of the valves where the rockers meet them need to be resurfaced, and check the spring pressures and make sure that it's going to follow the cam profile, and just basically put new seals and get them back running again.
Nice. So one thing that John did not have, he didn't have the seals, so I had him get them from Mark over at Indian Moto Parts. And also what was unique to this head was they were a little longer, right?
The Indian had their own valves made to their spec, so it fit their blueprint to the new engine, and so they're a little bit longer than, say, like an S&S valve, which is longer than a stock Harley valve. So it was out of the range of anything that I would have. So we had to look at making these like brand new.
Yes.
So we did.
They cleaned them up, polished them, and did all the good things to that. You know what they do, they work their magic here. Another thing is you also do port and polish. You have anything that you're working on right now that you could show the Indian Gilroy community?
Yeah, I've got right now, I'm finishing up a twin cam where we put in a considerable size bigger valve. This one is got a stock size combustion chamber, and then it has new valve seats in it, so it'll accept this 1-inch 940 thousandths intake valve and 1/610 on the exhaust, and a 650 lift spring kit that I'm about to put on.
Nice. Can you explain the advantages to, because I know you did my S&S heads back from my chopper like maybe 10 years ago, but can you explain to the community about the advantages to these brass valve guides?
If guys that are motorheads working with cars, they've known that most of the auto manufacturers have gone over to this. The grain structure of this bronze, it's a bronze manganese, and the manganese will work harden with movement and heat. It gets tough, and because of the grain structure being a lot finer than cast iron, it's not so coarse, it doesn't tear up the valves as much.
Okay.
So when you do a ream on a cast iron guide, they have to put in more clearance for the valve.
Okay.
Because they'll have a tendency to gall to the valve, so they make a hole bigger. It makes it a little harder to control the oil. With these, I'm able to fit the valves really tight. They just don't move. But they're fluid back and forth. So that's the advantage is the closer you can fit it, the more it's a heat sink. It pulls the heat out of the valve and makes it go out through the head, through the finned area,
Right.
and pulls the heat out.
How about lubrication because of the brass? Is it, does it absorb more oil?
No, not so much, but it's being that it's a finer finish. It feels like it's on ball bearings in here.
Yeah.
It's so
Sure, it looks like it.
just smooth as silk.
Let's see that.
It's unbelievably smooth. You don't feel any grain go as it goes back and forth.
Right.
With
right.
cast iron, even with anti-seize on it like I have here, you can feel the cast iron.
The roughness on the cast iron.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, some people can't, but if you handle enough of them, you'll know the difference.
Right, right. Now, just for FYI, if these were my heads, the ones out in the front, I would have gone with the brass guides, just because I know I did those on my SNS.
Oh, sure, but there's an application for both.
Yeah.
There's times when you want to use a cast iron.
Right, right. So the advantage to porting and polishing is...
The main thing, I think that's the beauty of the V-twin is you can tailor it to how you ride the bike, what you're looking for. Unlike if you go buy a Kawasaki or something like this, you just put the key in and you just ride it.
Right.
And that's it.
Right.
If you buy this and you go, God, I don't run at 6,000 RPM. Can you do something to make me some power at 2,500, $3,000 where I ride? That's what you can do with a V-twin. So when you choose a camshaft, it's going to ask for a certain amount of air at a certain RPM. That's when it's got its sweet spot. And everything else has to keep up. So if your cam is asking for 400 CFM, the heads have to deliver 400 CFMs. It has to be able to go through it.
Right, right.
So if you have stock cams in a motor, porting and polishing is probably not going to do you any good. It's not worth the money to put into it.
Right.
Because you're not asking anything of the head.
So, but when we're talking about cams, we're talking about something that's maybe not too extreme, right? Because then we have to change valve springs and valves and all that, right?
It's possible.
Possibly,
because you
right.
got to check to see what the travel is of the spring you have.
Right.
And what the upper collar to valve seal clearance for the maximum lift.
And another thing I wanted to ask, on the springs that you saw on my heads, are those typical springs, or is it something that we'll have to bring in, buy them from somewhere else, source them somewhere else, or can you supply the springs?
Oh, I can supply the springs.
Not the seals, right? You didn't have the seals.
I didn't have, for those valve guides, I do not.
Okay. Okay. So you're saying if you install the brass valve guides, you'll be able to have your own seals and all that, right?
Yeah. And you can get seals anywhere for our valve guides. They're not proprietary.
Okay. So you guys heard that, right? So if you guys want to install those beautiful things there, he'll supply the seals, the springs, everything for the PP100s and SNS. SNS is no problem, right? Because
they're the same as ours.
Right, because 99 to 2001 Chiefs and Scouts came with the SNS engine, the 88.
Right.
So for you guys that have the SNS engines, no problem. Send your heads in and he'll work his magic. Do you want to kind of take me around the shop? I see the guy over there polishing, doing some work before we end this video.
Yeah, we're doing a lot of the new Harleys, the M8s. So he's pretty well slathered with those things.
Yeah, those M8s, I don't know about those things.
Well, they're a lot of work. 4 valves per cylinder. And
Look at this, guys.
On this particular combustion chamber, we take that same head you saw in there, and I weld in the combustion chamber, and it's just been roughed in at the moment.
Right.
And we reshape it. So the stock chamber is 85 cc's in volume, and these are 79 cc's in volume. And this allows us to create a better shape so we can force more of the air and the gas to the middle of the chamber and burn a higher percentage.
Nice.
Because that's part of the problem with a lot of these combustion chambers. They're too deep and they don't burn all the fuel. So to get these things to run, you got to make them really rich.
Right.
And we get to run leaner because we're burning more of it.
Wow. Okay.
We get a higher
Makes
percentage
sense.
of burn.
Yeah. Now on like our heads or the Indian heads, the PP100s or the SNS, when you get a full head job, will you completely resurface the
Oh,
gasket
yeah.
sealing surfaces?
Yeah, and like on these, we'll ask you what cam you're looking at, because different cams require different compression ratios.
Okay.
So we will do that at the last minute when you go, well, I'm looking at this cam, and then we run it on the computer and find out what kind of compression it'll end up with that bore and stroke and compression and CCs.
Nice.
And then we'll deck the right amount off the head. And
Okay.
like yours, we didn't take anything off. They've just been on a lapping plate and straightened.
Oh,
they're just flat.
Flat. Okay, good. Did you notice any kind of
No,
discrepancies?
they were actually really good.
Okay.
So,
Cool.
But since you didn't want to change your compression ratios,
Right.
we didn't want to take any off.
Okay. All right. Makes sense. All right. Let's go. Look at all this machining they have here, and I think we could just get over here through a good view through the.
Yeah, he's doing an M8 in there. These are M8s all in here.
Okay.
And what we do with each head is I put them in a shrink wrap bag. We heat them up, and the bag shrinks over the head so we don't get our dirty hands all over the paint and everything else.
Right,
That's been a huge help, because in California, the worst thing in the world is, the hardest thing is cleaning the parts.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse. Nothing more time consuming, really difficult.
Yeah.
So these are all here for me to weld.
All these are for welding?
Yeah, I pulled
Holy
the seats out
smokes.
already. So as you can see, all the seats are out.
Yep, yep.
And I pulled those out by welding. I run a bead of weld around them.
And then just pull them?
And well, they fall out.
Oh, they fall. Oh, they shrink.
They shrink.
Yeah, with the heat. That's right.
And then my welders are really special. My TIG welder, Lincoln, was really nice to me. We set this up. It's actually a 500 amp machine now, and I use a really big torch,
Nice.
which uses a 1/4 inch diameter tungsten, which most people have never even heard
It's
of.
a heliarc, right?
Yeah, heliarc, but
Heliarc, yeah.
that's my tungsten.
Wow.
So it's big. But
Yeah.
the reason I did this is the arc is very stable, so I get no contaminants,
No
tungsten,
porosity, no nothing. Yeah.
So when we polish them, they're like a mirror.
Yeah.
Even with weld material and
Right.
these motorcycle heads are cast out of God knows what, because they don't care.
Junk?
Yeah.
Yeah. We got abrasive blasters over here. This is what you use on my heads, right?
Yeah,
The bead blasters?
Yeah, I've done them with different medias, a fine and a coarse.
Nice.
And then these are getting taken apart here and cleaned. And then these are more to be taken apart. And same with these are more to be taken apart.
Wow.
I got lots to do.
I don't know exactly how you keep track of all this, but
Jay Leno's crew turned me on to using these things, which are
they're just
it's an aqueous cleaner, and they're heated. And with these plastic tubs, they don't scratch the heads, which is really great.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it uses a biodegradable cleaner that is based off of a vegetable oil.
Nice.
And it does a better job than when I had the solvent-based safety clean tanks.
Right. Then you have to wear a respirator and
they
all that
stunk.
crap. Yeah.
These don't smell at all. And I
Yeah.
just thought, these are great.
Nice. Very nice. Cool.
We've set up the machines to where I don't have to change over stuff very often. I can do a finished deck. I can cut intake valve seats, exhaust valve seats. Then I can cut the seats themselves in the end mill. I use this for, I cut the cylinders. A lot of guys like them for, especially the S&S guys.
Right.
They want them to look like your Indian, very rounded.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
So I
yeah.
round cut the Harley cylinders
It gives them that custom look.
to give them that Indian look.
I saw that on your website. Yeah, so you guys could check out his
That's what I
website.
do.
Yeah.
This is all set up to just do that, and I do a lot of it.
For the S&S guys that want their cylinders and heads looking like the PP100 round bottle cap engine, this is what he does here. Go to his website and you'll see his work. And yeah, as you can see, he's very busy. So turnaround time is all going to depend on how, the workload is. So when you guys do send your heads, and cylinders, do you bore out the cylinders?
We did for a long time.
Okay.
But, our guy retired.
Okay.
He's 75, and he just said, "I'm done."
Okay.
And we haven't found anybody that does them the way we want them done yet.
Not even LA sleeve?
I'm not familiar with their boring.
Yeah, they're
I know
Whittier.
I've known them for doing sleeves, but
Right.
not for the finished boring.
Okay.
The other company is Q&E.
Q&E.
Yeah, but they don't like to use torque plates.
Oh shit! Yeah, that's
And-
important.
And I'm still kind of hung up on wanting to use torque plates.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
So until then, until we find somebody else, that's what we're going to do.
Okay. Well, there you have it, guys. This is Branch and O'Keefe in Signal Hill. It's surrounded by Long Beach here in California. So if you guys have Indian heads, the Power Plus 100s, or if you have the SNS heads, man, send them in, get them done, tell him what you want, and he'll fix you up for some more power or some more efficiency. So thank you, John.
Sure.
I appreciate it. Appreciate the time. What is it? 15 minutes of his time to do this video of his shop and us here for SNS and for Indian community. Cool. All right, guys. Thank you. Hope you enjoy watching.